So, next game that we're going to talk about is South Carolina and Tennessee. And it's interesting for a number of reasons. One, South Carolina, to me, I mean, if you didn't know, sitting at 3-4, it's not great, but it's also, they've lost. Two of those losses were Texas A&M and Georgia. The other two were a close game against Kentucky and kind of an ugly game against Mississippi State. They don't know who their quarterback is. I mean, they don't have any. I'm sorry, they don't have any identity at quarterback. So they've played three different guys at that spot so far, and most recently Jake Bentley in a 6-point win over UMass last week. But then you've got Tennessee, who's maybe reeling a little bit, but had a bye week to get healthy. I don't know how much health they got in that bye week because they had some pretty bad injuries going into and leaving the Alabama game. So maybe discuss a few things in this game. Let's talk about, obviously overall this game and how this matchup looks, but how this game impacts Tennessee's race to the SEC East title and where Tennessee is in terms of an injury standpoint.
Right. Tennessee lost both starting offensive tackles in the Alabama game. Like you said, it's kind of unclear where they're going to be. At least to me, I haven't really heard where they're going to be exactly going into the South Carolina game. But we rattled it off, and at one point they were down, 8 starters, and it's hard to overcome that, right? I mean, it's just so dadgum hard to play football when half your starting unit weren't guys that practiced together, half the starting unit weren't guys that knew what the plays were. They didn't know what all the protections are. They're not used to playing side by side. And what that creates is, a lot of confusion. It's not just a lack of quality from the players. And you can, but, you can, when you take 3 or 4 injuries, you can plug somebody in and the veteran can kind of point out, where you need to go. Once you lose that 5th guy on a unit, and the 6th guy on a unit, at that point you don't have any veterans left to point out where you're going. So, yeah, I mean it's rough. It's rough, and I think the offensive line issues kind of rear their ugly head, and I think it could matter a lot for one reason, and that's that everybody knows South Carolina's offense is bad, right? It's cough cough. Make a joke, Will Muschamp, Neanderthal football, 4.92 yards per play. There are only 2 teams in the SEC with under 5 yards per play. Those would be South Carolina and Vanderbilt, averaging only about 300 yards of offense a game. Pretty rough. But, hidden in all this is that South Carolina actually has the top-rated pass defense in the SEC. Now, I know they haven't maybe played as good teams. We talked about that list. Not really a great list of opponents that South Carolina has gone up against. In fact, you could argue they're pretty bad. But, South Carolina did play Texas A&M, and they played them pretty close. It was a 13-24 game. And I think that one kind of
7-7 at the half.
Yeah, and I think that gets overlooked. Why did that happen? That's because South Carolina's pass defense is giving up as many has as many interceptions as they've given up in touchdowns. They're giving up only 5.6 yards per attempt. And, Tennessee, when they've been good because they've been able to throw the football. They're definitely better at running than they are passing. And I think everybody sort of accepts that in some ways. But, despite that eyeball test, they're 11th in the conference in yards per carry. They're 6th in the conference in yards per attempt. And the reason that run defense is better at passing than running is that zone read stuff. It only really works when you're throwing the ball and keeping somebody respected vertically. And Tennessee's offense has really only operated effectively, like in that Florida game when they were throwing the football well. South Carolina is, for all their deficiencies, been pretty darn good at stopping the pass. And if they can do that and they can slow down Tennessee, it's going to make things interesting. And the injuries that Tennessee has on that side of the ball means that there's a lot more likely to have random lapses. And it will be curious to see if the offensive tackles that Tennessee have can avoid disruption, because the last time we saw Tennessee, they were getting bludgeoned by Alabama's pass rushers. But on the same side of the ball, I think Tennessee's Barnett can also give, South Carolina quarterbacks that are pretty terrible some fits. And you can end up with a really wonky, disjointed game where both teams are trying to run it to generate some offense. I could easily see neither team really being able to throw. And given the injuries that Tennessee has, this game could end up being much more of a slog than a lot of people anticipate.
Yeah, I think people were just kind of checking this one off when they were, and I'm in that camp too, in terms of, looking at what Tennessee needed to do to get back to play in Alabama or an A&M or somebody in Atlanta. And this was just one they just kind of checked off, right? Well, to your point about defense, South Carolina has had, in my opinion, one bad defensive game this year, and that was 27-14 to Miss State. If you want to look at the 28 points they gave up to Georgia in that 28-14 loss, they gave up a 28-yard touchdown drive, a 39-yard touchdown drive, and a touchdown on an onside kick attempt where they had just scored. It was 21-14. And they caught the onside kick and ran it in for a touchdown. So that game was actually pretty close. They hung with Georgia, and if not for 3 turnovers, they might have beat Georgia. So you can't count a team that plays really good defense out, and it's crazy to me that they're playing good defense because they don't have the talent to play good defense. I think this speaks to Muschamp a little bit, and not to take a whole lot of credit away from Steele at Auburn, but before Muschamp got to Auburn, they were horrible defensively. And I don't think it's a coincidence that last year they were better and this year they're even better. The guy can coach them up on defense, but also, as we saw with Muschamp at Florida, coached them up on defense, and they could not score at all. So South Carolina still doesn't know what's going on at quarterback, which scares me a little bit, going against a team in Tennessee that has some disruptive capabilities on defense. So for that reason, I'm going to take Tennessee in this game. But y'all, pay attention to this game because it's not a guarantee for Tennessee.
Yeah, and I'm in the same boat, right? You've got to pick Tennessee. There's nothing South Carolina's really done to show that they're going to win ball games. They are 3-4 for a reason, but it's exactly what you said. They may be 3-4, but they haven't given up 30 points in a ball game yet. And if you can hold opponents to under 30 points in every single ball game, you're going to be in them all. And considering the injury rate, there's no reason for me to think Tennessee is going to score 30. So it easily could be another one of those 17-10, 21-13 sort of games we've seen from South Carolina. And, same exact vein we were talking about with Florida, Georgia. When you're that low, it gets weird. And it's Florida, Missouri we had in that same vein last week and I guess 2 weeks ago, right? And that game ends up being like 40-14. Why is it? Well, because Missouri throws 2 pick sixes and the game gets out of reach. When it's so tight and you're struggling to score and you press, weird crap happens. And sometimes it means the underdog, wins in a weird result, and like in Vandy, Georgia. Sometimes you end up with Mizzou, Florida, where the favorite runs away with it. But it just, what I'm getting at here is the fact that you're having to press so much means the result gets a lot more random. And this is definitely one of those games where I think anything can happen because neither team really has any real advantage. And both teams are going to have to kind of get out of their comfort zone to try to move the football.
So give me a score on that one, just to keep it interesting.
I'm going to say 21-13, Tennessee over South Carolina.
Okay. Give me. I think South Carolina actually scores a little more than normal this time. I'm gonna say 24-20 Tennessee. But I would not, if I see Tennessee with an L in this game, I wouldn't be shocked. And then we're talking about South Carolina maybe going to a bowl. So, because they've got Western Carolina, Missouri, and who knows? Clemson's out there. Maybe they can drop an L on them too.